Additionally, as I said, this committee has broad jurisdiction, and I would hope that, as the chairman said this morning on CNBC, we would use it. I cannot agree more with the chairman for what he said today. He said people are now suffering. But, Mr. Chairman, why are they suffering? When you said we're going to look at the whole financial meltdown across the board, why is it we left Freddie and Fannie out? Why is it Franklin Raines, who apparently committed perjury before this committee, has not been brought back before this committee or referred for prosecution? Why is it that, in fact, Bank of America still holds vital documents showing 28,000 loans? Mixed in with them are hundreds or thousands of loans to government officials throughout the country, from the top to the bottom, from Republican to Democrat to Independent, who were clearly given what amounts to a bribe of government by a man who was brought before this committee because he made too much money while Countrywide stock was dropping, but has not been brought before this committee once we discovered that the Friends of Angelo program, in fact, was designed to influence members of Congress, key staff, and people throughout the government. That is not a small scandal. That is the crux of this scandal. If the trillions of dollars that the American people are on the hook for at Freddie and Fannie and as GSEs are, in fact, because Countrywide had a cozy relationship bought and paid for that allowed them to unload, not all, but much of these bad debts, and in fact allowed for the promotion of subprime and other risky instruments, then in fact, Mr. Chairman, that is the heart of the financial meltdown. The financial meltdown is not about the failure of the SEC. It's not even about Bernie Madoff and the billions that, in fact, he did opaquely without proper supervision. That's important, and we need to deal with it along with the Financial Services Committee. But the very underpinnings of good government require that government officials, when they take an oath to their city, their state, or our country, in fact, operate without an agenda bought and paid for by public or private money. It's clear that's not the case here. It's clear that the distortions in the market go back years, and they go back to government officials, quasi-government officials, and private sector, including, obviously, the Friends of Angelo program. So, Mr. Chairman, I challenge you today either to issue a subpoena to Bank of America to get those records, or allow this committee to have an open vote so the people of America can understand that, in fact, this is an important issue. It is not a side issue. It is at the crux of this very investigation. And I might note that when we began looking at this problem, when we had Angelo Mazzillo in front of us, there were tapes, digital copies of every single conversation between members of Congress, members of the administration, postal workers, Freddie and Fannie, even Franklin Raines, that were held so we could hear them. Today, I'm told they may have been destroyed. When I hear they may have been destroyed, I realize we have been lax in our duty since that chair was held by Mr. Waxman, and we had a crook in front of us that Mr. Waxman called a crook, said, in fact, that he was hurting the American people. Now we know, in fact, he bought and paid for what hurt the American people. Mr. Chairman, I call on you today to issue that subpoena. It is that important that I bring it up at this hearing, and I call for you, if you cannot do it, to step aside and allow the committee to have a vote, and I yield back.
Let me just respond to the gentleman. I see he's sort of worked up over that issue.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I am worked up because we need to protect the American people. We won't do it if we don't investigate this corruption.
Let me respond by saying to you, number one, the Justice Department is looking at it.
Mr. Chairman, that's what the chairman of this committee said previously as an excuse. It turns out they didn't. It turns out the Senate Ethics Committee has failed to act and said, in fact, there was no ethical violation. We're beyond ethics here. We're at a point where the American people at least should know who they gave money to or benefit to, how they did it, and so on. We have ignored that paper. I have never seen this committee refuse to at least ask to see documents before deciding to ignore them.
Before we go to our witness, let me just say to you that I did not say the Senate Ethics Committee was looking at it. I said the Justice Department, so which is as you know, is a difference.
Mr. Chairman, if the Justice Department had subpoenaed the audio tapes, they would have them. They didn't, and it appears as though Bank of America allowed them to become destroyed, or they were destroyed in the last days of Countrywide. But more important, those documents as we've been told, have not, in fact, been subpoenaed. The Justice Department does not have the boxes of documents that Bank of America has gathered but will not turn over without a subpoena for reasons of privacy. If you tell me today you're referring it because you have enough information to the Justice Department for prosecution or investigation, fine. But today we don't know what we don't know. What we do know is there was a level of intended corruption by Countrywide that clearly had an effect on government's decisions for years, and we are ignoring it. We cannot really understand the failure of government if we don't understand the failure of government officials led by, in fact, an attempt to bribe them.
The gentleman's time has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Let's move forward.